for that. While Mike sorts out the last day, good evening everybody, thank you for having me along tonight. I thought I would speak to a couple of points I think will be of interest to folks in the inner north, and then I'm happy just to go to question mode. There we go. Okay, thanks Mike. So yes, these are the couple of things I thought I would quickly touch on. Haig Park, you can see the list there, I'll just get into it. Haig Park has come up a couple of times already tonight, and the key points I want to make here is that, you know, as we all know, it was originally developed as a windbreak for the city, and of course a lot of the rows of trees are now heritage listed, which makes the management of the park a particular issue. TAMS did a draft master plan, or draft management plan for Haig Park in 2012. Excuse me. But it is my view that I think in many ways Haig Park is not currently meeting community needs. It's quite dark, it's quite sterile, a lot of people consider it quite unsafe. Sorry, I must have got
It's known as Raper Park.
Yeah, I wasn't going to go there, but yeah. At the same time, what we are seeing is more people are moving in, and the area is becoming populated by a sort of younger crowd and also a more dense crowd. There are people wanting to make use of the park, and we're starting to see a few people picnicking in there and a few other bits and pieces. So I think that's a sign of where we need to think about how to manage Haig Park in the future, not lose the values we value about it, but at the same time make it more accessible, create some spaces where the sun gets in, make some spaces where you can kick a football around, or these kind of things. And so I think we've got some work to do on Haig Park. I think particularly as the density and redevelopment takes place in this area, Haig Park, it will be a critical green space for all those people who are increasingly living in apartments and who will, because they don't have a private domain, will use the public domain as people tend to in European cities and in places like Portland, Oregon and the like. This year, just in the budget just passed, the government's just allocated $1.5 million for path and lighting upgrades. That is, further to the earlier questions, on the north-south pass-throughs at the moment. That's the predominant, I guess that's the most urgent thing to be addressed. But clearly there is some thinking going on about how to make some east-west connections across the park, including cycle paths and the like. Now that's going to take a bit of discussion, and we'll start to gear up for that, but the immediate works will be that money to improve the lighting and fix the paths. Those who use them will know that there's puddles there at the moment, they're uneven and the like. So that's Haig Park. Sullivan's Creek, I just sort of have this, that's another of our green corridors. We've got Haig Park across here and Sullivan's Creek this way. When it comes to Sullivan's Creek, particularly the bike path, it is the busiest bike path in Canberra, and it is reaching capacity. We actually have congestion problems. That's a first in Canberra. And so the consequence of this is that we've allocated money in the budget to do a couple of things. One is to widen the path. So it will go from its current 3 metre width to a 4 metre width from Barry Drive up to Bennett's MacArthur Avenue or Mowat Street.
Yeah, we plan to get to MacArthur at this point in time. Yeah.
Thank you. So that particular area, busy area, will get a widening, and also there's going to be some new road crossings at those 3 streets that are listed on there: Goodwin, Masson and Commnunity.
So is that, sorry, maybe at the end.
Far away.
Is that going to be a resurface or just a widening?
In most parts, we can achieve just the widening, and where the surface needs a treatment, will get a big treatment as well.
And those crossings, they're going to be raised crossings?
Raised priority crossings at cycles.
Okay.
Yep.
The existing surface is pretty poor along there, I ride on.
Yeah, in some areas the tree roots.
Yeah, it's patchy in places.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is that I'm very keen to continue to see more of the creek areas naturalised. Part of the long-term efforts to improve the water quality, slow the water down, make sure that by the time it gets to the lake it's been filtered much more than it has. And we've already seen that. People will know we've got the various wetlands around, which have both been, I think, quite successful in their environmental performance, but incredibly popular, just as nice spaces, recreational spaces and the like. I wanted to just quickly touch on the City Farm at Turner. This is part of a broader interest I have in increasing the amount of food being grown in the urban area, but a number of community people came forward and said they wanted to have this City Farm. We've given them a 2-year licence on a site here in Turner. Some people in the room have probably been to the site, you've seen it. It's I think this is a really great project, and if you haven't been involved and would like to be, they're always looking for volunteers. Similarly, we've now got a proposal come forward from the community for the Lyneham Food Forest. Now, this is the area marked in red just here. You'll recognise here's the primary school, the drain, Lyneham High is just out of the picture here to help people get their bearings. This is a proposal to plant fruit and nut trees and essentially have an open orchard. And the concept is to be a common. That was its original name, Lyneham Common, so that it's not fenced off or anything, it's simply there in that very much a spirit of a common. It's actually been out for consultation recently, and that just closed in the last few days. And I haven't got the full report from Tams yet, but we received over 400 people commenting on the project, and 97.5% of people are apparently positive. Now there's a first for Canberra. So that is, that project seems very likely to proceed now, and we'll get back to the community group with the feedback we've received and like. But that's just an interesting project in the north. The Dickson Shops redevelopment, others in this room will speak about it much more thoroughly than I have. But I tabled a petition in the Assembly on the 7th of May on behalf of the community. And I was very pleased to do that because I thought the proposal was simply wrong. And I'm very pleased that ACLA has rejected it and has essentially rejected it twice now. And so hopefully we'll see a better design come forward. Certainly when I spoke in tabling the petition, talked about the need for creating something that's appropriate in scale to the area, seeks to make it more of a human kind of development, in the sense that Dickson's a very popular area, and the monolith we saw put on the table there was frankly very people unfriendly. I could say a lot more about that, but again, as I say, I think most people in the room probably know more about the project than I do, so
I just put my hand up and say thank you so much for sponsoring the petition.
very happy to do that one. I won't talk about this one, other than to say the Lyneham Neighbourhood Oval has been, again, people in the room will know there's been some controversy around this project, but there's been a lot of work go on. The initial proposal, as I said, I don't think met a lot of community expectations, but a lot of work's gone in, and there's been some really good discussions happening in the community, and there's a meeting tomorrow night at Lyneham High School at 7 p.m. Where a revamped proposal will be presented to seek some community support for a new proposal. And so I won't speak about it at length now, but if anyone's interested, that meeting's on tomorrow night, and I would encourage you to come along. I think it'll be a good discussion. The last thing I thought I'd mention that I don't have a slide on is simply, since I was last here, the bill that I got forward to limit or to put further constraints on the use of cooling powers has now passed the Assembly. And this is a bill that is sought to improve the level of pre-DA consultation. As the Greens, we've long held the view that when there is pre-DA consultation, projects tend to go a lot better. Because at that point, the proponents have a lot more flexibility. And our experience has been that when there is pre-DA consultation, more changes get made and there's a better partnership between the community and the proponents. The bill was modified from what I originally put up, but the end effect, and I'm happy to go into details, is that it has increased the pressure to have pre-DA consultation before a cooling power can be used, which I think can only be beneficial for a lot of projects. I'll leave it there. There's lots of other things. I'm happy to touch on the budget or in the north issues or whatever you like.
Thanks, Shane.
Hi Shane, I'm with the Turner Residents Association. I'm particularly interested in the Haig Park proposals. You referred to the draft management, we understood it to be a management plan that was put in, from memory, at least 4 years ago. Anyway, around that period. It was after an extensive consultation, and we understood that quite a lot of Haig Park had heritage values to it, especially the different rows of planting. We've always felt, on the Turner side at least, that Turner Parklands, the area between Haig Park and Barry Drive, was an area that would be better positioned to meet the open area needs of the denser living, and particularly it would be great if something like the gross pollutant trap went ahead and was removed. Sorry, and improved with the waterway improvements that you've been talking about. There is constant pressure on that parkland area from development, like the bus layover. And just this month, there's been a proposal from the ANU that we've had to put objections in for a childcare centre for more building on open parkland areas. So under the bus layover proposal, there was a landscape plan that was prepared. We would be very keen for that to go ahead and hopefully meet some of the needs that you see need to be met for denser living.
Yeah, the great challenge with Haig Park, as I said before, I think is to not lose the heritage values, and that's why you've seen some replanting going on through Haig Park in the last couple of years where trees have come out of those lines. At the same time, I think we can do a lot to open it up, and that's where there is a master plan in place. But I have discovered that work that was done in 2012 in the consultation I've just discovered in the last week or so, the plan was never actually finalised after that work. So there's a draft sitting there, and I'm not quite sure of its current status.
Our understanding that, yeah, it was sat on by the government because the management plan required expenditure.
Yeah, it wasn't sat on by me, I just discovered it wasn't finalised. So there's a bit of work to do there, yeah. And I think in some ways we might need to reinvigorate that discussion, because I think people's view of what Haig Park can and should be is evolving. And I think it might be time for a bit of a further discussion on Haig Park. So we'll get something going.
Just a follow-on question.
And nothing's going to change straight away. It's not like we're about to start.
What about that Turner Parkland area? That's a huge green area right next to Civic that is just constantly being targeted for urban infrastructure.
I haven't heard about that ANU proposal.
It's on their North Oval lease in the northwest corner. Yeah.
Chris, sorry.
I was just wondering about the Braddon retailers want multi-storey car parking on Haig Park.
Peter Conway wants all sorts of things. I said Peter Conway wants all sorts of things. It's not on the government's plans at the moment.
Good.
Please let us know. Please let us know if it is.
Yeah, the first I saw it was in yesterday's paper, or Sunday's, whenever it came out, so no one's come to me with it.
So, Jen?
Yeah, quick question. Again, thank you so much for the petition. I wanted to pick up on what the gentleman over here was saying about the need for greater mobility for an ageing population. And I'm conscious, a friend of mine recently had a hip replacement, and so she has a disabled parking permit. There are nowhere near enough disabled parking spaces in many of the places that people are trying to get to. Especially close to pharmacies would seem to me to be a very important location. And I wonder whether there needs to be a review of the parking and vehicular access code in relation to disabled parking provision. The truth is that if the weather is wet and cold and windy and people are elderly, you know, the slippage, the slippery surfaces are obviously incredibly dangerous, you know, for anybody who has a dodgy hip. So, you know, there are potential liability problems there as well as other public safety concerns. So actually getting that managed well, I think, is really important. And your portfolio obviously covers this area.
I don't have roads ACT anymore, and it's going across to McGeneral. But on disability parking, a couple of things. There is a code and a minimum number of spaces that have to be provided.
Yes, and they are really, truly minimum.
And yes, and across the ACT, we meet those everywhere, and sometimes exceed them. That said, if there are particular areas where people have a view that there's not enough, you should contact Roads ACT. They'll go out and do a survey. And there are places around the city when Roads has been approached by people and say, look, we've got a lot of older people in this area, or there's a particular service there that requires more disability parking spots, they'll go and add them. And that's possible. We'll go above the code if there's a good case there. The other side of it is that, and this is a very tricky area for the government to try and sort out, and we are thinking about this at the moment, is that we've seen a massive increase in the number of people who have disability parking permits. GPs are the ones who sign off on the permission for you to have a disability. They just sign a form that says you qualify. But there are now, I can't remember the figures again, Ben, you might help me here, but 18,000 disability parking permits, and it's gone up like 80% in the last 4 years or something like that. Don't quote me on those numbers, but it's that sort of order of magnitude.
And we're getting older. Sorry, it's going to keep going up.
So let me finish. I don't want to cast aspersions, but I don't think the number of older people or the number of people with a disability has increased that fast in recent years, and we think that there's probably some, if I might delicately put it, misuse of the permits going on. And so that's, you can imagine, that's a very tricky issue for government to try and think its way through. In terms of the broader policy position, which Arthur went to earlier and which you brought back, I'm glad you did, because it is a challenge, and certainly not everybody is going to be cycling, which was the suggestion, and everybody's not going to be walking. I don't think everybody's going to be driving though either. You know, a lot of older people will reach the point where they can no longer drive, and so we need to be providing a range of transport options for them. And so, for example, we've just brought in the Bus Plus service that's running for people who, at the moment, if you're a pensioner or there's a couple of other requirements, I have a mental blank, you can actually ring up and book the bus, and it will come to your house or your nearest bus stop and drive you to the shopping centre or to Canberra Hospital or Calvary Hospital, depending on where you live. We've brought that in specifically to target people who are struggling with mobility, and instead of trying to have an action bus that covers everywhere all of the time, we've formed the view that it's better to have a service that is more specific, more tailored to people's needs as they become less mobile, and it's actually a free service.
Can I just ask a follow-on question, because I'm not certain, but there's a woman, an elderly woman in a street nearby, and she mentioned, I think, this service,
Yep.
and she said it was an excellent service for getting you there, but then the service expires after 3 o'clock or something, and so she wasn't able to actually get home again.
It does at the moment, because the buses we're using are our special needs buses, which take the children with a disability to school in the morning and the afternoon, and they were sitting around doing nothing for 6 hours in the middle of the day, which is when a lot of older people go out to things. And so for not a lot of money, we've been able to liberate this whole new bus service. But yes, there are some limits on it at the moment. That's quite true.
Talking about mobility of elderly people and so on, what I've seen in a number of European cities, I don't know how suitable it is for Canberra, is this golf buggy type electric vehicles, you know, scootmobiles, things they call them, which are particularly suitable for people with disability and also elderly people who are not very much able, and not able to cycle either. I hardly ever see them in Canberra. Is there any kind of thinking along those lines, whether there's, you need to have the right kind of footpath and all sorts of things, but setting up some sort of network for, I think in some of the European countries are even government subsidised and various things like that. Can you comment on that at all?
No, I've not seen that on a major scale. I mean, people do have them in Canberra at the moment. There's motorised buggies. There's no particular barriers to those that I'm aware of, other than the fact that our infrastructure is quite poor in places. You know, the ramps are bad and there's gaps in the footpath. I mean, that's the barriers that are out there. There's no legal barrier that I'm aware of. In terms of a sort of provision scheme, I've not seen that before, so I couldn't really comment. I'd be interested to see more about it. Just on that, the other project we're running out of TAMS and Roads ACT is a project on age-friendly suburbs. This was an idea that came forward from the Ministerial Council on Ageing, and we started with Holder and Ainslie, Western and Ainslie, and so we went through and audited the suburb to say, well, from a physical infrastructure point of view, what are the barriers to mobility for older people in the suburb? And again, that sort of resulted in more ramps being put in, pedestrian refuges, fixing up broken bits of path and the like. And that went very well. And in this budget just coming through, we funded 2 more suburbs for that. So it's quite an intensive focus on a particular suburb to try and bring it up to a standard that says this is the kind of suburb we'd expect and want for older people to be able to move around. So we're learning some good lessons out of that. Sorry, Anne.
That's right, Shane. I think that the feedback from those 2 suburbs, the work that you did on those was quite good. I'd just like to make a point about the disability parking permits. Quite often the disability is not obvious, and it's not necessarily just the older people who have the disability parking permits. You know, we have a wide range of people who are visually impaired who also have disability parking permits because someone is driving them. And obviously, if they're visually impaired, they've got difficulty walking as well as anything else. And I think that there's, I agree that the parking permits have absolutely skyrocketed in numbers, but I do think that there's also a lot more people who have disabilities who are entitled to those permits. And so you need to be a little bit, it's not just older people who have them.
Yeah, sure.
And there has been a great development in the community to get people with disability, all kinds of disability, out into the community. And those parking permits do help that considerably, really.
No, it's a really fair point. Hopefully I was careful in the way I talked about that before. Yeah, we kind of have this sense that there might be some problems there, but it's
look,
hard,
I think there
it's
are.
hard to work out how to
but it's
unpick that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think there's a moral issue too. I've got a disability card for Marion to be driven wherever she is, but if I'm using the car myself, I won't park in a disability parking space, even though I've got a sticker.
That's right.
And I think everybody should follow that rule too. Don't use it if you're not disabled, use it if you have to.
I wish everyone followed that code. I thought my sense is perhaps not.
But I think it's important to reinforce that that's the rule.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Yes.
Shane, I've got two questions actually. I was just wondering if the government has a program that actually maps green space and its expansion, its uses and its loss over time. I know that New South Wales councils do this sort of thing, and I'm just wondering, that's my first question, because I was delighted to see the delightful initiatives that are happening with the Lyneham Common and things like that in the Turner Farm. But I suppose I look at Glebe Park and it gives me the horrors when I think about the way that's been nibbled away with the parking bit and the apartments that are being built. It was a park, and yet it was the glebe, and the glebe is, you know, it has a huge amount of heritage involved, and I hate seeing that sort of thing happening and projecting in the future. We know we're going to need the green space. My second question is somewhat related, because a number of us were at a Vergers meeting recently that Gabrielle Joseph coordinated, and it was a very interesting time. And my second question comes out of that, because it would seem to me that, again, comparisons are odious, but the meeting made it plainly obvious that Queanbeyan Council has a lot better things going in relation to monitoring what's happening in relation to the destruction of verges or the misuse of verges, the appalling OH&S issues relating to verges, and their ranges. Number one, they have more ranges per person than we do in the ACT, to monitor and to report and even fine on the spot when people are abrogating the regulations in relation to verges. And these can be parking, these can be destruction of verges, and also and what would you call damage to trees. And I just find both those things are sort of related in my mind, and I was wondering if you'd like to comment on them.
Let me start with verges. You know, I get very distressed by seeing people parking on the tree, you know, under the trees.
Yes.
And we know the damage that's doing to the trees, especially in these older areas where the trees are so well established. You know, I think verges is a tricky one in terms of things like encroaching on footpaths and the like. Again, if there's a particular area, people are welcome to contact what's now Access Canberra, used to be Canberra Connect, and the rangers will go out, and I often send them out because I get letters from people asking about this, and they will go, and if there's vegetation going across the footpath that's not government, it's private, and I'll leave a letter for the residents and ask them to pick it up, and they come back 4 weeks later and follow up to make sure it's been done. So that happens. So if there's particular problem areas, you can always go for a little bit of...
I think it's a general education problem. You talk to people, they're unaware that it's illegal not to park on the verge outside your house, for instance.
Sure.
It's, I think, a general education.
And the parking inspectors will not book you unless there is a complaint from the owner of the house. So anyone can park on the verge as long as they've got the permission of the people who live there.
This is one of the nasties for government. If we sent a parking inspectors out and booked everybody that was parking on the verges, we'd probably have a riot at the Assembly.
You'd have a
And
lot
so
more
it's
money in the coffers though.
It can be done by education about, about the damage to the trees inside. That would be a better...
The other thing I'm interested in, and I'm doing some work with particularly TAMS at the moment, but also with staff in EPD, is to think about whether we can actually make better use of the verges and make it available to people for food growing and the like, for example, because again that's an area where there's a lot of land out there that could be put to some more productive purposes, and we need to have to think about that in terms of issues of mobility, people moving through areas, safety, those kind of things. But at the same time, I'm interested in whether we can use that space better and I hope to have some progress on that soon. In terms of your question around green space audit, I don't think there is. I don't have a sense there's a map. I could be flippant and say that's what the community councils do, but that would be cheeky.
We don't have aerial photography facility.
No. I think the parks and reserves all have quite strong legislative protection in that sense. It's the areas that people will sort of consider to be open space, but actually on the territory plan are community land or whatever. I think they're the ones where people get caught by surprise, and they're the ones probably where the dispute points lie, I think.
Getting back to the age-friendly suburb comments, Alison from the Lyneham Community Association. My area of interest is getting kids to school safely, reducing obesity, fitness-related matters. And I note that we're starting to get increasing numbers of the inner north roads featuring on the accident hit list that was released in the Canberra Times earlier this year. On the map that's in front of everybody there, the big curve, Brigalow Street, that's the one, yes. Yeah. We understand that that's been upgraded to major collector status. I know that's something that Mr Dospot has had interest in the past, the question of what treatments can be possibly made available to schools that are on roads of that nature, and I know that affects our brethren on the eastern side of Northbourne Avenue as well, with some of their major public and independent schools. I'm getting really worried about the risk that parents and children could be seriously injured on some of these roads. They were designed in the 1920s as part of the Burley Griffin Garden suburb concept. They were executed in the 1950s, and without these roads being significantly reworked, they are coping with much larger volumes of traffic than they can safely do, and I'm getting extremely worried about it. And are there any plans that you're aware of in terms of these issues being considered and looked at?
And I think this goes to the questions that Leon's posed, which I'll cover now as well, I think, because I think it's the same question. There's no doubt the roads through the inner north are under traffic pressure, and that applies on this side of Northbourne and the other side of Northbourne. TAMS, or Roads ACT, have done some work to examine these roads and to reflect that increasing traffic volume, and so none of the roads have been reclassified. There is a document online in which TAMS has measured the volume, and under some of those volumes those roads would warrant a reclassification, and a draft document has gone up online which canvasses these issues and invites comments. The roads have not been reclassified, and so it is out for comment at the moment. The contact is a fellow called Darwin Zeta in Roads ACT. Darwin's contact details are in the document online, but you can just ring TAMS and ask for Darwin. And that work at the moment simply reflects what's actually happening. So that's that bit of it. In terms of your question of what are we going to do about it, I mean, I guess that's a big question around, we need to push for more big picture, we need to work on more sustainable transport options, make public transport more attractive so that we have less people resorting to car travel. That's the big picture answer. The small picture answer is we need to keep looking at roads like this to look at engineering solutions, and that's Ben and his team's particular area. Excuse me, to consider traffic calming, more pedestrian refuges. As we're talking, as I mentioned earlier, with some of the prioritised bike crossings for the inner north bike path, what you'll see on streets like Masson Street and the like is a raised bike crossing, so that improves the safety for whoever's cycling, be it children or adults. So it's a series of responses that need to go to those sort of things.
Can I just say, just quickly, in the United States and the UK, it's incredibly popular to have the lollipop lady or the lollipop man, which I haven't actually seen very much in Canberra.
You use them in Victoria a lot.
Victoria.
And that's a very effective way.
I watched one at age 14 in the country South Australia.
Right.
And the schools is actually the other interesting zone. We're seeing real pressure on school zones around parking and traffic, and it's actually a very interesting study in psychology, because everyone wants it to be safer, but the same parents drive like a maniac when their children are safe.
Yes.
It's quite bizarre to go to a school car park and observe these things, but it's a real challenge for both the education directorate and roads.
Okay, let's just get in order here. We've got Marcus, we've got Dennis, we've got Neil,
Sorry. Yeah, my question is essentially the same as Alison. So these roads are not major collector roads, is that what you're saying? Or?
They're currently not classified, but the traffic volumes now, so roads get a classification based on volume and a few other bits and pieces. And, but the volume of traffic going up so much could shape the way they get classified, because one of the key measures is by being healthy.
Number of cars per day.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean,
so at a planning level, when you design a suburb, you obviously want to identify where you will focus your vehicular movements and other movements. So traditionally, the suburbs have had road classifications. What we're finding now, only in particular in the inner suburbs, is roads are performing outside of what they are classified for. And so we've done a study to identify which roads that in the inner north that would cover, and the document that you talk about has identified those. The implication of a change of a reclassification is how you can manage and monitor that road. So it's not about just allowing more traffic to use it. It allows us to use different engineering solutions and different techniques to manage the traffic that the lower classification of roads would be suitable for. So it's an issue for us to resolve, but at the moment it's out to public comment. So.
Marcus, was that you?
Yeah, I seem to be a little bit more confused than when I started. Because, well, I mean, Roads ACT has told us that these are major collector roads. I mean, they provided me with a document which says, you know...
And it says draft across the top.
Well, it does, but I mean, this was, you know, told to me, like, in fact, you've written me a letter saying the roads through Ainsley are major collector roads. So I'm not too sure, but then documents on, you know, TAM's website says they're not major collector roads. So I'm a little bit confused as to, you know, exactly how they're meant to be classified. And then when I look at the territory plan, major collector roads are required to be 10 metres wide, and yet most of the roads in the sort of Lyneham and Ainsley area are only 9 metres wide.
Yeah, and that 10 metres would be a modern standard. The reality we're dealing with is the fact that, not by design but by reality, a lot of traffic is using those roads, and so we have to balance how they were designed originally versus what's happening now and think about how we deal with that. And that's, you know, without sparking a whole light rail discussion, personally, that's why I advocate for light rail, because we have to provide an alternate solution. We cannot keep pushing more traffic into these roads.
Yeah. All right.
Yes.
Thanks, Shane. On the urban open space, a bit of a follow-up there, and I've been doing some research into the open space around us and coming up with anomalies in the whole system. And so I'll let you take this on notice in part. But I found a number of areas that are classified as PRZ1 open space and also RZ4 medium density housing.
Really?
Yes.
Double classic.
And not quite in your bailiwick, but in the bottom right hand corner, Lyneham High School there, CFZ, Community Facility Zone, and RZ4.
Right.
Now, I'm going to err on the side of bureaucratic stuff up rather than a conspiracy. However, there does seem to be a lot of that. And out of the picture, top right, Lyneham, the...
Southwell Park.
But to the right, to my right. Yeah, just here. The archery field.
Yes.
Is classified as RZ1, community open space. Now it has a fence around it, which goes against the planning for PRZ1. But why would you want to be in the archery field? Especially if you've got an apple on your head. So there seems to be a lot of anomalies. And
that's interesting.
I've just pulled out spreadsheets full of all the classifications, and it is. I was going to have presented to tonight's meeting, but I can't because it's just.
Is there a question that, like, is there something going to be
so
solved?
Yeah, but take it on. Is there some way we can get some clarification of all these, because it's...
that would sit with the planning agency. So what we should do is probably just organise for you to meet with the right person from ACPLA or
But
planning.
it is community open space we're also talking about.
Yeah, but sit down and talk through some of those anomalies and work out whether it's why there's an apparent anomaly there as a starting point, just of research in the first instance.
But there's also probably a precinct code overriding all zoning
Probably, yeah.
for the whole of the
Dennis, I'm going to help
ACT.
facilitate the meeting.
So that, you've got to look at that as well.
Okay, Neil.
So my question is just on the on traffic through the suburbs, following on from those earlier ones. We in Turner see a lot of rat running going through, and we've identified traffic coming off Barry Drive, particularly at Dryandra Street or at Nicholson Crescent.
Yep.
They pour in left and then work their way through the streets along Masson Street. If there could be at that intersection, for instance, be very simple, a sign saying no left turn 7 to 9 in the morning, as there is up on Archibald Street, going into Mowat Street going into Archibald Street. No right turn, or no turn off into that street to stop the rat running up the top there. That would be a simple solution to reduce some of the traffic going through, using the suburban road instead of staying on Barry Drive.
I think we can have a look at that. I mean, I think maybe some of the parents that take their kids to Black Mountain School and have a concern, but we can work through some of the details.
Okay.
Happy to have a look at it.
Hi, Max again. This is about this road safety, and so I also see, to me, seems to be a bit of an anomaly with speed zones in certain areas. Like, for example, the area where I live in Watson, I live quite close to that intersection roundabout where you go off to Sydney,
Yes.
you know, by the fair there, you got the petrol station there. And then if you go drive along Antle Street and then all the way to Dickson, and you've got about 3 or 4 changes of speed zone, you know, 60, 80, 60, 40 and 80, and it's all over the place. And it seems quite anomalous to me. And it causes the traffic to speed up and slow down at various places. And as I said, I think it does cause, and it's actually quite narrow. Like I live at the fair there on Angle Street there, and it's quite narrow, and the cars really go pretty fast along there. So can't we have some kind of rationalisation of those speed zones so that it's sort of all one zone, 60 or whatever, well, except for of course the 40s for schools, right? But, and even outside Dickson College, around the roundabout there, you got a short piece which is 40, and then it goes back to 60 again, then back to 40 again. I mean, you know, over a relatively very short, you're talking about a few hundred metres only that it changes.
Roads ACT did a big audit of all the speed zones across the city about 3 years ago.
2 years ago.
2 years ago. And there were quite a few changes, probably about 100 sites across the city in which some anomalies and updates were put in place, and various speed zones were changed to pick up some of those issues, but various people had written into TAM sort of raising those questions. I know the road you mean, I can picture all of those speed changes. I mean, obviously the 40s are there for the schools.
Yeah.
I guess if there's areas of particular concern, we can always have another look at them, but I guess each of those decisions has been made for a particular reason, you know, and in some senses, you know, the section between where the fair is, say for example, and along to where the houses start at the sort of northern end of Hackett and Downer, I suppose it is. You know, it's kind of there's no one around, and so in a sense that is potentially a higher speed zone, and people want to be able to sort of go
I
higher
find it
speeds.
quite surprising that there's still an 80k zone. I mean, previously it was a rural zone, and there's still horses, and there's a big Madura Park there and all that. Yes, I agree.
There's also an unsafe turn off the road on a crest.
Into the TV
Yeah,
station.
the crest
Over
there.
to the other side of the road.
Knobs?
Oh, Ted Knopf's found
Yeah,
it.
that's
Okay.
I think we can have a look at Angle Street.
Okay, thanks, Ben.
Yeah, I'll reinforce your comments about schools. I live directly across the road from North Ainslie, so I see them every day. And the kids at school really aren't at risk from the cars during the day at all. The cars watch out for the kids watch out for the cars. It really isn't a problem. The real danger is people who pick up and drop off kids, and that really is dangerous. And the kids that walk home are safer than the ones that go in cars. And the parents are the worst offender. Now, if you're going to push walking and riding, and I think that's in lots of cases a really good idea, start there, because there's a whole lot of kids being picked up and dropped off at school And they're close enough that they could ride and walk home, and believe me, they'd be safer than going through that Le Mans start that the parents do. It really is dangerous.
And there are some great programs around it, and it depends a little bit on the individual school and the teachers, but some of the walk and ride to school programs are really getting some, certainly the government's strongly supporting them, but it does often require a motivated teacher or two to get behind them. But that's where some of the kids sort of team up, because parents are concerned, they have safety fears, stranger danger type
They
fears.
watch too much American television. We're not America, we're not that dangerous.
I would tend to agree, but there are perception concerns. Now, we live in a generation now where if you don't supervise your child to the nth degree, you get some pretty bad peer pressure as a parent for being a bad parent if you're not supervising to the nth degree.
I think you're right.
That's very challenging.
There was a suggestion of no stopping within 200 metres of a school.
It would be bad.
At least they get 200 metres of exercise.
Unless you live 200 metres from the school.
John Conroy from Downer. I want your thoughts on the Downer redevelopment of the school. I put 2 submissions in. One of them I thought was way off left field, but listening to some discussion tonight about the Sullivan's Creek run and the little common garden orchard area, I put an idea in that, seeing that the school's already gone, it's a beautiful vacant lot, put a little wet area, a little lake in there with a barbecue, with a little community garden, etc, etc, etc. What's the chances of that, is the second part of the question, than having this monstrosity that they're going to build there?
Again, someone might correct me, but my recollection of where Downer got up to was that recently a new precinct code was issued for Downer, and my read of it is that it addresses a lot of the issues that were raised by the Downer Community Association, or Downer residents. And so a lot of issues around setbacks, tree retention and the like are addressed in the new precinct code for that development. And so from that point of view, and since that precinct code came out, I've not received any or representation from the community about that. So my read of it was that people were satisfied by the changes that have been made.
That it's still a major development in the centre of the suburb.
Yep. There's also a strong sense that will help revitalise the shops, and so there's a range of people who are quite positive about that in the sense of bringing energy back into the shops. But I'm happy to hear other views. That's just my read of where the community's at.
Yeah, I think there's a few people in the area that are pushing a certain line, but I live across the road on Melba Street, but the people around close to the area, there's people further out, they couldn't really care a stuff what goes on because they don't live there.
Sure.
But other of us around the area, we feel that it's just way too excessive in an area like that.
Have you seen the new precinct code?
No, I haven't heard that one.
If you want, I can grab your email address later and I'll get it sent out to you.
Okay, yeah.
As a starting point, just for some info, and then we can talk further from there.
Right,
We don't seem to have got on to 4 questions, specifically item 4, which really had to do with things to do with buses, trams, etc, etc, etc. You don't seem to have addressed those.
Well, so I was just waiting for them to come up. I've just been taking the questions.
Yeah, okay. I was sitting here waiting for them to come
No, you've got to ask them.
Yeah, no, that's all right. I'm happy to go there. I wasn't seeking to avoid it. So this is the question, just a range of... Sorry, I really wasn't trying to blank you there, Leon. There's been a lot of questions.
Yes.
This was the question about the greenhouse emissions from light rail versus high-occupancy vehicle bus lanes. Yeah.
Well, there's a whole lot of them. Infrastructure, construction materials, bus trips, could be made. Yeah, it's a list of questions.
It is a list of questions. They're quite detailed.
Yeah.
And it goes to, and I know Leon has a paper out on the greenhouse consequences of light rail, his views on that situation. In this question, I think there are a number of, in this series of questions, there are a number of assumptions about behavioural patterns as a result of certain decisions that people will make. I don't necessarily share those views of those behavioural changes. And so I have not done a series of greenhouse calculations as asked by the question, because I don't necessarily share the assumptions that are there. What I'm happy to say, in terms of things like transit lanes of course do need space. And so if we were to put transit lanes on Northbourne Avenue, we would have two options. One would be to remove an existing car lane.
Really? Hooray.
Or the other would be to put additional lanes in Northbourne, which would involve cutting into the verge on either side of the road. And that's a discussion that can be had. What we have seen though is that transit lanes in Canberra have not been particularly successful in changing behaviour. We have a T2 lane up Adelaide Avenue. I think there's a couple of others around town that I have a mental blank on their location. They've not seen a significant behavioural change in terms of high occupancy vehicles. And then we get into the broader questions about, it's my view, and it's generally the academic assessment, is that bus rapid transit and those various versions of that do not provide the same level of opportunities and benefits that a fixed line rail will provide. Bus rapid transit will provide some benefits, but the assessment in the business case is that it is cheaper to do bus rapid transit, but the benefits attained are not as high as by light rail. And that goes down to a detailed discussion about community preference for a fixed line and the planning responses that produces.
Yeah, there's a real ethical issue here. Metro have stated in their documentation that fully developed light rail would only be able to be regularly used by about 10% of the population. And yet we're spending a huge amount of money on it when a very small proportion will be able to regularly use them when there are other options which would inherently be able to serve much more area and benefit the whole community. I really have a basic equity issue with a very expensive system which benefits such a small proportion of the population. The only benefit that I can see in doing it really is a real estate one. It's not a transport one.
I strongly dispute that equity argument. The government regularly spends money in all parts of the city where a limited portion of the community will benefit from the said expenditure. And whether that's the upgrade of Ashley Drive that's about to take place, I will never use that section of Ashley Drive because I've got no family down there. It's not a part of town I go to.
That's not the issue.
Well, it is the issue because you're saying that we are spending money on only 10% of the population. But government regularly spends money on segments of the population. The government previously built Tuggeranong Parkway, Adelaide Avenue, the Monaro Highway, all of these transport options. People spent hundreds of millions of dollars on these, and so I reject the assertion that it's inappropriate to spend money on providing a transport solution for Gungahlin, which is ultimately going to have a population of about 88,000 people.
Now I'm talking about the extended rail system through the whole of Canberra, if it ever happened. Even then, it will only benefit people who happen to be quite close to that corridor and not otherwise.
Well, no, and that we need to produce. I mean, what the government does need to do is produce a fully integrated, and we're working on this quite hard, a fully integrated transport response. Obviously, only a limited percentage of the population can ever live walking distance from a light rail track. Now that will increase as urban densification takes place. But we also need to integrate the bus services so that, for example, when we do the first stage, Gungahlin, the buses will reorient. And so we'll start to do some public work on this soon. We'll come out with some consultation, but the buses will need to realign so that instead of travelling through to the city, they'll feed in and out of the high-speed spine. And you'll see that across the city, and so you're increasing the transport options for people as we extend the light rail further.
But people hate changing. They don't want to get out of a bus into a tram.
Okay. Sorry, okay, Leon?
Shane, I think the only mention of greenhouse emissions in the division, the light rail, in Capital Metro's business case, is a table that shows that buses have more than 300 times the greenhouse benefits of light rail. Would you like to comment on that?
I can't think of a section you're referring to there.
It's one of the tables. One of the tables late in the thing that says buses have 14.04 cents benefit and light rail has 0.14 cents benefit. I think it's a mislabelled table.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't think of the table off the top of my head, so I'd have to talk to you about that another time.
Okay.
I can't. It's 130 pages of document, I just can't recall it.
Okay, now, Chairman, we have a question from Steve Dospot. Is that
sure?
Okay, yep. Just checking.
You're asking a question, John.
Question time.
Limited time to get the answers. Shannon, I have to say I was a little bit bemused when you're talking about the concern for the trees where the cars park near them, yet you haven't seemed to express too much concern about the 500 trees that will go from Northbourne Avenue. I mean, it's a simple one. You are concerned about the issue, yet you haven't adequately explained that. And secondly, I know you are under the impression that the whole community is very interested in the solution that you and the government is offering through light rail. But is it fair to try and lock a community that is seemingly very much divided on this into a captive situation where contracts are signed probably 5 months out before an election? If you're so convinced that the majority of the government the majority of the community want to go with this solution, why don't you leave it to the election to decide? Because otherwise you may be locking, according to our figures, a very significant number of people into something they don't want.
I'll take the trees first. I think it's just not appropriate to draw a likeness between the trees on Northbourne Avenue and the protection of habitat trees and the like. It is quite clear, and the government and myself have been perfectly upfront about the fact that the trees will need to go on Northbourne Avenue to put light rail in. Those trees are the 4th generation of trees planted on Northbourne Avenue. We have a highly artificial environment which is a manipulated landscape. They are beautiful trees. Many of them have reached the end of their natural life or on their way to it. We know that if you go back about 5 or 6 years, there was 900 trees on Northbourne Avenue. You said there's about 500 now. It's something like that's 480. 484. We are seeing those trees decline. And so they will need to be replaced anyway. Some of them will be replaced before the end of their natural life, there's no doubt about it. But the government has a very clear commitment to re-landscape Northbourne Avenue. And now that a decision has been made on the tree species, or as soon as that's finalised, and it's close to being finalised, the replacement trees are starting to be ordered so that they will come at a relatively mature state. And so there is an intent there, and that is a consequence, and none of us have tried to hide that. On the issue of waiting until after the election, both the Greens and the Labor Party went to the last election with an intent to develop light rail. As Infrastructure Australia recently noted in their report on Australia's... Infrastructure Australia just released a report nationally on the need for infrastructure in this country. And they said the biggest challenge for building infrastructure in Australia is short political cycles and governments not committing to getting on with projects. Canberra needs a transport response. We need to commit to this and get on with it. And it's on its natural timetable. And I don't think that we can just wait and wait. The contracts will be ready to sign in the first quarter of next year. It's not, I hear Jeremy now saying, it's only 4 months. It's not. It's most of the year, and we need to get on with these projects.
Catherine?
The projects going to be starting in 2020 anyway. Why you have to sign a contract like 4 years apart?
Because that's how long it takes to build it. And so works will commence as soon as the contract is signed, and it is about a 4-year process from contract signing through to final, public usage of the tram. That's the preparation phase, build phase, testing phase, all of that sort of thing. It takes time.
Do you have anything to do with graffiti?
Yes, I do.
Good.
Well, no.
You're on camera.
Exactly. It wasn't me on it, Your Honour. I wasn't there.
Only on Liberal Party signs?
No, Tams is responsible for it, so far away, yes.
I know. What's the government, or I suppose, we're not the government as such, I suppose, but
Yeah, no, for this one.
I have some issues. It's not in North Canberra. I have a business in Hume, and we've been graffiti and I've been ringing the government and talking to different departments, and they keep shoving the normal public service runaround. And trying to find out what the government and the courts actually do to these people that do the graffiti on people's thing. I mean, they said if it was on a government building, the government will then pay to get it cleared. But this is on a private building, but the fact of the matter is, whoever did it has to stand on government land to paint my building. Therefore, the government's problem or issue, as far as I'm concerned. But what happens to these people? It's twice now. I keep cleaning it, they keep coming back. I've made 2 suggestions to the police, but they don't like my ideas. You spray pack and you use this finger to press the button. So when you catch them, you chop that finger off, so they can't do it again. The second issue is not as dramatic and violent, but when they get caught, you put them on the website and you say, this is where they live, this is their car rego number. Feel free to go around to their house and graffiti it, to give them the hint that, excuse me, don't do my property, or we'll do your property.
Yeah, look, I understand. Sorry.
Yeah, so what does the government actually do to stop these people? Because I've been overseas in some cities, Singapore, Dubai, no graffiti whatsoever. People are made to clean their mess up. Here, it seems to be so slack, and you come in every arterial road and there's just masses and masses of graffiti. You go to Hume on the Monaro Highway, cross, touch wood, my building hasn't been hit on the highway yet, but it's disgusting. So what's the government do to sort this issue?
Lots in that question, I'll try and be quick.
Yep.
I mean, I understand your frustration because it just looks, you know, some places look pretty ordinary, and it's, you know, in terms of catching people and how we deal with them, the hardest part is actually catching them, just because they do it at night under the cover of darkness and the like. And so there's plenty of laws in place. If somebody's caught, there's a range of fines and penalties that can be put in place, but most often it's impossible, nigh on impossible, to catch the people involved. The government has, you're correct, that the government's responsive is if the graffiti is on a public building, we'll clean it off, and particularly if it's offensive, we'll get out there real fast. If it's on private land, we do ask it's the responsibility of the private property owner to clean it off. And certainly TAMS will provide contacts for advice on how to do it, contacts for cleaning companies and the like. We've just committed in the most recent budget additional money for cleaning up graffiti on public places, and also we're bringing back a graffiti coordinator position. Bear with me a sec because this one might seem counterintuitive, but what we're trying to do is actually work with some of the graffiti community to have places where they can do legal graffiti, so some of the big murals that you see in some of the laneways in the city and on the drains and the like, where they frankly liven up some pretty creative space. And the idea there is to sort of engage people in we're a place where they can constructively have a bit of creative outlet and hopefully stop them from doing the stuff we don't want to see. So it's a multi-pronged strategy. We've got more money now to clean it up faster. We've also got some more money to try and facilitate some street art, which hopefully channels the energy, and also, in a lot of places looks really good, livens the city up a bit.
Street art's fine, but what about restricting the sale of the cans? I mean, most of the graffiti is done by spray cans. They're all being sold by over hardware shops. Can't we do something on that end? So we don't sell, all these spray cans to minors. They're obviously going to use it for nothing else but graffiti. Sorry.
Well, they're locked up in the shops anyway. They're all under lock and key.
Yeah, the ones who are really determined will go and shoplift it anyway. So it's trying. I guess the strategy we're trying to use are proven to be the most effective strategies, but they're not foolproof.
I'm treasurer of an organisation that has a number of buildings that was targeted. We found that if we washed it off or got rid of it as soon as you can, that discourages them coming back because they don't see any reward for having done it. If their work's washed off straight away, they'll go somewhere else.
Well, this wall on our building, no one can see it because it faces a piece of government land backing onto the railway line that goes back a Hume. And I saw a guy today and asked him how much it would cost, etc. And he thinks it's someone that's just starting out because they're practicing where they won't be seen first to make sure they get it right.
Tertiary education.
Yeah, but the first bit that was done, they've actually used brake fluid in the paint so that when they spray it on or however they get it on, it actually soaks into the concrete so fast that this guy who soda glass guy, he's been back to a job he's just done on this side of town 3 times to try to get it off the concrete and it won't come off. So these guys have got... But what are the penalties and fines for these people?
Oh, I'm sorry, I can't recall the specifics off the top of my head, but there is a range of offences in the Criminal Act for graffiti and vandalism and the like.
Okay, are there any other questions? Any more questions, Kathy?
Sorry, I can't...
Sorry, hey, can we have a question in the back, please? Sorry.
I've got a question. This is for Mr. Fluffy.
Oh, yes.
We got the petition and table it in the, on the 18th of February, and we haven't heard any response from the government yet, and you were part of the government and you also Minister for Justice. What's your advice to get us, for us to do?
For a petition that's presented in the Assembly, the government has to table a response within 3 months.
Yep,
So that would be by now, yes. I don't know who's got responsibility for that petition, but I'm happy to find out why there hasn't been a response. Normally, it'd probably be the Chief Minister, Andrew Barr, and he should have tabled a response by now, I think, so I'll chase up why that hasn't happened.
Okay. Any other...
Shane, I understand that TAN's provided the modelling for the time the light rail will take to get from Gungahlin to Civic. It was not done by Capital Metro, it was done by TAN, Lake Plan. All that sort of modelling is based on a lot of assumptions, and there's been some very clever people trying to reproduce.
You were telling me,
yeah, and they can't get below 35 minutes. You know, remembering that you've got an almost 60-tonne vehicle, it's not going to be roaring down Northbourne Avenue at 60 kilometres an hour across intersections. Because
I'm not in a position to answer detailed questions on the modelling, but I'm happy to set you up with the people who did it.
Can we contact the modelling people?
Yeah, I don't know who did it exactly, but I'm happy to find out.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thanks. Thank everyone. Thank you.
Do you want a copy? Yes, of course. I am going to leave the meeting straight away. You have to excuse me as you hear. I'm a bit under the weather. I'm going to go home, so thank you for having me tonight.